Alrighty, welcome back to Developers Let's Play of Defender's Quest. I'm Lars Doucet, I'll lead developer and do a bunch of stuffer.
And I'm James Cavan, I'm the writer.
Yep, and we are Level Up Labs, and we are in the previous video we showed you some stuff, now we're going to show you some more stuff.
I should probably say up front here that I'm actually getting really sick and losing my voice, so that's the reason that I'm just this kind of constant zombie moan in the background.
Yeah, his voice is actually usually even more sexy than it is right now. So
I was really hoping with just a little bit more time it would turn into that I'm sick Barry White voice where you're just oh. But it's not happening for me, so gonna have to be stuck with this.
Yeah, I can dream. Oh, also, as long as we're doing full disclosures, I should probably tell the audience that I have Tourette syndrome. So if I get a little worked up and start seeming like I have a very strange personality, that's where that comes from. But to those of you who are hoping that I'll start randomly cursing, I'll probably just randomly start saying the word pineapples or random strings of nonsense, which is actually more common. But that probably won't happen, so we'll just start playing this battle and tell you about Defender's Quest.
Yay!
Okay, so this is the second tutorial battle. And real quick here, we're getting a little more exposition. You want to talk about this cutscene?
Well, here we needed to establish really quick. It's like we've already established, hey, there's monsters and they want to eat your face. So now we needed to explain where those monsters came from. We were trying to address basically all of the player's immediate questions within the course of the first couple levels rather than front-loading all that.
Right. And so we chop up all these little bits of things that would normally be a big scrolling text dump into several little vignettes. So here we have this, we just spell it out for you, infected.
It's like we established in that one line, we've got an infected guy, there's a plague, there's tribute, there's some guy named Ozamal who's collecting tribute, he's probably not a nice dude.
Right.
Just trying to communicate as much as possible in as little space.
Because Slack lives here and knows what's up. He's a native. He already knows that we need to be getting the heck out of Dodge. And Azra, naive and new to the place, is like, well, let's help the people. Which is honestly probably what I would do in this situation.
Yeah, something I wanted to communicate visually with Azra is I think she is our only character that doesn't have any sort of disfigurement. Where everyone who's been in the pit for any time at all has scars or missing fingers or ridiculous stuff with them. So she is visually the fresh meat.
Right, and that works personality-wise too. Everyone else is maybe with the exception of Bakal, everyone else is either basically got PTSD or severely cynical about the world or something. Even Bakal has his super martyrs complex. So Azra's the closest to a straight woman that you see in the story. And then here's another point we're trying to introduce is why Azra's powers are special. Because if we're immune to the plague, why do we need to be afraid? And then we describe that they turn into monsters, which admittedly is a bit cliche, but I think we took it in an interesting direction. And as far as Slack knows, basically... Oh, that gets explained in the next cutscene, so we'll just get our faces eaten. And so this is that battle we were talking about. So we initially had the first two... What you see now in the first two tutorial battles used to be rolled into the very first thing the player saw, where we try to show them boosting, summoning, using lightning, showing you multiple spawn points. We're trying to show 7 different things all at once, and we eventually came with this workflow where the first level just shows you summoning and boosting, and the second one shows you the rest of the stuff. And another thing in tutorials is actually repetition's important. Usually you need to get the player to do something not just once but twice so they understand it, and just pointing things out usually isn't enough. So and then, of course, you can disable tutorials at any time in the options menu. I probably should have made some options right here to do it, but whatever.
Next update.
So you summon Slack again, and this time it doesn't spell it out every way, it just moves the arrow. And now we let you put him anywhere, and a lot of people don't always know that this is where they should put the dude. They put him, here, and then they lose the mission. But, that's why this level's easy. It's this is you need to figure that out, and this is your safe-ish location to figure that out. So obviously, because we're expert geniuses. Actually, people on the forums are way better at playing this game than we are, but we like to think we're good at it.
I actually mostly just cheeseburger my way through. I think about things. Not at all.
Yeah, and so here, one of the things we wanted to show is you can click on these guys. Now that's obvious to me because I'm the developer, but people didn't necessarily know you could click on your guys. So here we're like, okay, you've played Slack, now click on him, dang it. And you can do that without closing the tutorial.
Yeah, one of the problems we ran into is because video games are so iterative. When we went into it, it's like, well, of course we know innately what to click on, not even because we're the ones that designed it, but because we've played all these genres before. So it's like, it's a video gameism. Anybody that's picked up a video game knows that, and it's like, well, no, actually, anyone that's played very specifically games of that genre.
Right, and because we're like a cross-genre game, you know, we need to teach the tower defense people the RPG stuff and the RPG people the tower defense stuff. And then there's just a bunch of people, like, I get emails from people saying it's like, oh, my 8-year-old daughter loves this game. And it's like, I'm not sure how many tower defense games she's played before, but like, we need to teach her the same mechanics that we're teaching someone's 50-year-old uncle, you know?
Yeah.
And so one of the things we show here is the targeting system. Not all tower defense games have this, and I don't think any of them have one as sophisticated as ours. And we just pointed out because you can actually get through the game without ever monkeying with the targeting system and just have everyone use the default. You probably won't do very well, and you'll probably need to play on the easiest difficulties, but like we feel like we should point it out at some point. And then, of course, press space to toggle pause. Probably the most important tactic in the game. And then it's like, oh, by the way, boost slack. You need to do that. Like, that's very important. You'll notice when you kill guys, the little PSI orbs come out there and then go up here. The entire point of that is to establish a visual connection between killing guys and getting more PSI. There also is a slight mechanical purpose too, because it introduces a slight delay between killing something and when the energy becomes available. I kind of like that tension personally. I know it drives people crazy, but I hope it's the good kind of crazy. Because there'll be like moments where you're like on like alternating between like half speed and pause, and you're like needing to cast like some like kill everything spell, and there's a guy 2 pixels from Azra, and you're like, get the energy there, get it there. And then you get to cast a spell just in the nick of time, and that feels awesome. So
I'm curious, how old is that little enemy popping animation? Because I recognize that from, I think, more than one of your projects.
Yeah, that's actually from Super Energy Apocalypse. Now, it's been redrawn, but the original one in Super Energy Apocalypse, like when the little monsters died, that was a vector art version of that. And I traced over it to make the pixel version. But yeah, I've been using the same little enemy grape juice splat for a long time. But yeah. Another thing is the little visual doodads over people. So when you click Slack, you know, this shows his range. When you hover over his boost, if his range were to expand, you would see that. We'll show that to you when you get the Rangers. But I wanted to show people what happens when they boost him. So you can see that his stats are going to go up here. That he's going to get +2 to attack and +2 to speed. And I wanted to visually connect this boost bar here with this thing over his head, so that you could see just at a glance what boost level he's at, because that's very important. And then the enemies, of course, their little health bars here, and it goes down in color as well as size, so you can get an indication of where everything is. Yeah, and then right numbers, because that's what makes it an RPG. Among other things. Man, those sword animations are so good.
That's something I was horrified to realize when we initially designed Slack, that I made him wear his sword on his back. And if you have my younger brother, who actually makes swords as a hobby, you will realize that this is something you will never, ever, ever live down, because you can't actually draw a sword from your back.
Yeah, there's this famous YouTube video about it, among like sword grognards, of this like super medieval Renaissance sword guy who like shows why it's impossible to draw a sword from your back, unless you do it in a really stupid way, in which point it's like it's technically possible, but it's like
it's going to take you 5 minutes, and you might dislocate your elbow,
and you'll get killed by someone who is smart enough to have his sword at his side.
So that was actually something, when we made the art upgrade, I was absolutely certain to get Slack to wear his sword on his belt.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, James's brother, like, is, like, big in this culture, and he's like, doesn't he, like, forge his own weapons and stuff?
Oh, yeah, no, he does a lot of stuff. We actually...
Yeah, so like, we couldn't make any, like, weapon, like, the game is not, like, 100%, like, accurate, but, like, anytime we wanted to put like a sword or a piece of armor into the game, we had to go through the Nathaniel Pass.
Yep.
Or so it was like I originally had stuff like studded leather armor, and he wasn't gonna have any of that.
Yep. That's why we actually have all of the light armor is basically cloth armor.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We'll talk about that when we get to the equipment screen. But right now, so here we're introducing that enemies can come from multiple locations, and so, and this is when it's time to lightning their butts. And so you'll notice that they're different both color and symbol because. As someone with Tourette syndrome, I grew up in kind of the disabled students organizations, and so they kind of beat colorblind friendly design into my head.
You would be amazed how many games don't do that. My roommate is colorblind, and we'll try to play just basic stuff where it's like, good guys light up green, bad guys light up red. It's like, no, what's wrong with you guys? And he's like, so which gray guy do I shoot?
Right. I mean, actually, it's like, so whenever I was kind of like testing the game on his roommate Ian, he'd be like, what's that? What's that? And I'm like, oh, well, that's the red one, that's the green one. He's like, oh, they look the same to me. And so that's kind of built in is just... And like 10% of the male population is got red-green color blindness. So yeah, this organization called Able Gamers has this document called Includification you should look up. And it's just got like all these action points you can do to easily make your game disabled friendly. Okay, and so this is where we show people that, hey, you can click on stuff here. So we click on her, and then we show you her skill tree, you know, and the little speech bubble shows how many points she has. So this is when you can invest in skills. And so whenever you mouse over them, it'll show you how much more you're going to get. We really wanted to expose information when it's important and communicate it to you at the moment it's important. So, when you're making a decision, you want to know, like, well, what am I getting for this, you know? It used to be you would click and it would show you the updated version. You could hit undo. But it's like, that's tedious. It's better. It's like, oh, well, I get 14.5 more. That sounds good. It's still a little bit obfuscated because, like, a lot of these stats are derived from, like Azra's spells get more powerful as she levels up because it's not really 42 damage. It's, like, her attack stat times some number.
Yeah.
But, like, that would be really complicated to show. I still haven't figured out how to solve that problem. Also, we made it so that lightning, like, burns off the amount of PSI reward you get from killing an enemy so that to avoid horribly breaking the game, where killing things with lightning gets you more than...
You spent on the lightning and you just get this positive feedback loop.
Right. So we just wanted to make it so that lightning... But if you've already spent, like, defenders, if defenders have hacked off most of the hit points, and you just take off the last hit point, then it's only, like, 1% less PSI. So we wanted to make it your, like, emergency leak removal tool, but not, like, something you would rely on for actual combat, which people were doing all the time in the early tests. So we had to put in tons of stuff to make them not do that. Assign. Okay, cool. Back to the cutscenes. So
I'd forgotten how fantabulous Slack's hair was.
yeah, I'm pretty happy with that.
It's like a Head and Shoulders commercial.
Yeah, and so here's where we mention that, you know, Azra's from the capital and who she is. She's the royal librarian.
The capital city actually has no name. It's only ever referred to as the capital.
Right.
Because I was like, I don't want to bother making up another imaginary word and then forcing people to memorize it. So.
Yeah, the only thing that's important about it is that it's the capital, you know? And then the Lord Regent, whose name we also never find out because it's just important that there is something like that.
Yeah.
That's a slight hint that Ash currently does not have a king. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not that that's important.
As of yet, anyways.
Yeah. And so then we're explaining, you know, how... This is where we kind of start explaining the relevant geopolitical background of what's going on, rather than just, you know, history lessons of a made-up place.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to just nail down that, like, this is the character you are, and guess what? They think about the same way you do. Because you're not going to be dying of a plague and like, well, let me just recap in my mind the entire history of my people.
Right.
Yeah, that's how it went.
Yeah, you think about the political things that are important to you and characters in your situation, and you provide that much information and nothing else. And so have that backstory, but you keep that in your story Bible, away from your players.
Yes.
And so, oh, here's where we explain something important. You know, at least the Revenant are gone. Wait, they're not gone. They're dead. And this is important because so far we were establishing basically that Revenants so far have been invincible. And people are still able to live with invincible monsters because, I mean, honestly speaking, to animals, humans are invincible monsters and they still manage to eke out a living.
Yep.
Mostly by avoiding us. And that's kind of what humans do here with Revenant, is that they live in fortified cities, they don't go out after dark, they travel in groups, lots of people die anyway.
We wanted to establish that these weren't the shoot them in the head, now they're dead zombies, because if anybody could kill them, then Azra is not important whatsoever.
Right. And so Azra's special power is when you go into the magical battle mode, Azra has the ability to kill the Revenant. And that's kind of what the halfway world is. I think now's a good point to talk about that.
Yeah, I guess we develop it later on in the story. We explain that a little bit more. But basically, we were trying to come up with an explanation for why the battle mode would involve an unmovable MacGuffin that you're defending, and then defenders that you summon out of the ether. Like, they just pop out of nowhere. And it's something that would be really, really hard to explain if you were just going with a straightforward, well, you're like a commander and there's soldiers. Like, so where were the soldiers hanging out before that? Why is the battlefield empty and then I place them as stuff is going on?
I mean, you could do it and just hand wave it with the battle system, be kind of abstract, but we kind of like to try and see if we can explain it, and if so, that can give us ideas for our story. And so that's the direction we took. I think we did okay on that. So like one thing that's important is basically whenever you go into the battle system, you're going to this magical halfway world between life and death. And Azra is the tower defense MacGuffin. MacGuffin, for those of you who don't know, it's a term Hitchcock kind of popularized, and it means the thing that everybody cares about in the story, that is the big plot device, that, like in a spy novel, it's the papers. In The Maltese Falcon, it's the Maltese Falcon.
Yeah, it's like something that in and of itself doesn't really matter, but it provides the motivation and drives the plot forward.
And in a tower defense battle, you are always protecting some arbitrary thing. And for us, that tower defense MacGuffin is Azra. In fact, her character class internally is MacGuffin. It displays as librarian, but internally she is a level 10 MacGuffin or whatever. And she has special code related to her MacGuffin-ness for being the thing that the monsters are moving towards. And so we need an explanation for that, why the monsters are coming towards her. And that gets revealed throughout things later. But basically, in this kind of halfway world between life and death that she can travel to, for reasons that will be explained later, she can bring people in, and there, when you attack monsters, you can kill them for good. And absent that, there's no way to kill these things. They just are reanimated by some dark force, and you just try and run away from them. And Slack, of course, is just happy to be in an advantageous situation where he can avail himself of other people's riches. It's kind of strongly hinted that he's essentially just been some sort of roaming bandit / thug before his reputable career as a hero started, and his insatiable lust for shoes.
There's nothing wrong with the shoes he's wearing. I realize I probably should have thought about when I was drawing him, but his shoes are perfect.
Yeah. Well, you know what? They're perfect, but he's bored with it, and he needs new ones. So here is when we introduce the currency. We actually introduced this twice, and we'll see it here, but basically we thought, in a pit like this, they're probably,
gold is not going to mean a whole lot.
And I also hate games where you basically have just like wheelbarrows full of gold that you're trading for like a Kleenex.
It's like, you want a loaf of bread? 50 gold.
Yeah, and it's just like, you know what? If your money is basically worth as much as trash, then it probably should be trash. And so basically the idea is, in a pit like this, where basically freedom of movement is limited because you got to stay in your little like highly fortified village with sticks all out on the outside to keep the horrible monsters out, you probably don't have much in the world of earthly possessions. So like a ratty old shoe is probably like good trading material. And at the end of the game, you basically represent like a large army that's able to go out there and beat up the monsters that are guarding all the good stuff. And you literally are going to have wheelbarrows and wheelbarrows full of shoes and rusty knives and spoons.
Yep.
That you can then basically like buy all kinds of like high-class equipment with, because you basically got all the stuff. And so that's kind of how we dealt with the inflation thing and scrap. Basically, Fallout did this. And then we introduce the first villain.
Ozamal Kaz.
Yeah. And so where did that name come from?
I just made it up. Just thought, well, it sounds vaguely Ash.
Right. And so here is where we try to give the story some trajectory. Like, we've introduced this backstory, we've introduced these things, but we now need some kind of motivation to really kick things into high gear. It's like, okay, I can survive, I can kill monsters. In your traditional RPG, this is where you would go talk to the king, and the king would give you some quest, and you would do something stupid. Instead, we have you be immediately thrown into prison, and basically this starts your long and lucrative career of being on the run from various bad guys, which hopefully we feel like gives some good motivation and forward momentum to the plot, basically. Okay, that's probably a good stopping point, and then we'll start the next battle here.
Sounds good to me.